She was called the ultimate blonde bombshell, a woman so famous, so photographed, so mythologized that even now, a century after her birth, she is still defined by her image. The white dress, the red lips, the platinum blonde hair, the breathy voice. This is how many of us know Marilyn Monroe. She forged a remarkable, era-defining career, and no one can deny the lasting nature of her star power. But if we only focus on her stardom, we're in danger of forgetting how she got there. The truth is that the woman known as Marilyn Monroe worked ruthlessly and consistently from at least the mid-1940s to pursue her career. This month, the 100th anniversary of her birth, we are looking beyond her on-screen image to tell the real story of the sharp, ambitious woman behind the iconic Hollywood image. Before Marilyn Monroe, there was Norma Jeane Mortenson, and her early life could hardly have been further from Hollywood glamour. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, worked as a negative cutter for the movies, trimming and removing sections of film marked by studio editors before assembling final prints. Gladys struggled with severe mental illness and married 3 times, suffering abuse at the hands of her first husband that caused her to flee with her children to another state. Though Norma Jeane's father is noted on her birth certificate as Gladys's second husband, Martin Edward Mortenson, later DNA testing showed that the future star's real father was actually Charles Stanley Gifford, Gladys's superior at Arceus Studios, with whom she'd had an affair in 1925. He was largely absent from Norma Jeane's life. As a result of this tangled family web, Norma Jeane's childhood was unsettled, and she often moved between foster homes and relatives in 1930s Los Angeles. As a child, she was tall and skinny, and some of her classmates reportedly nicknamed her the human bean. When she was threatened with a return to foster care at just 16 years old, Norma Jeane made a practical choice for stability, and she married her neighbour, Jim Doherty, who was 5 years her senior in 1942. She later spoke about the decision, telling one interviewer, "I didn't know anything about marriage, especially the sex part of it." Looking back, she was keen to differentiate her own feelings and life experiences from her bombshell image. Soon after their wedding, Jim joined the Merchant Marines, and Norma Jeane took on a stay-at-home wife role. But as World War II continued, her trajectory changed. While her husband was posted to the South Pacific in 1944, Norma Jeane took a job in a munitions factory near their home in California. And it was, perhaps surprisingly, in the factory that she first stepped into the limelight. The story often goes that Marilyn was discovered by chance, but that's only half true. It is true that when a photographer visited the studio to make a morale-boosting calendar, Norma Jeane posed for the camera. She loved it, and the camera loved her. Norma Jeane signed with the Blue Book modelling agency and began earning more money. But when her husband and mother-in-law found out, they were less than pleased. Jim was reportedly tolerant at first, saying, "I thought it was fine. She could do that until I got home. But then she got deeper and deeper and more involved in it because I was gone so long." In the face of these objections to her new career path, Norma Jeane was not deterred. Showing her growing sense of ambition, she filed for divorce and from that moment began to transform herself. Norma Jeane dyed her hair platinum blonde, and when she secured a 6-month contract with 20th Century Fox in late July 1946, she adopted a new identity. Borrowing the first name of a Broadway musical star and the maiden name of her mother, Gladys, she became Marilyn Monroe. As Professor Lucy Bolton explained to me on the History Extra podcast, Norma Jeane consciously created Marilyn. She saw Marilyn as her professional, dramatic creation, her star image, and she devoted herself to honing that and working at it. You can listen to this podcast ad-free on the History Extra app or wherever you get your podcasts. But her initial success wasn't to last long. After 6 months of studio work, soaking up all she could about camera angles and lighting, and attending acting, singing, and dancing classes, Marilyn was dropped by the studio. She wrote of that time in her posthumously published autobiography, My Story. "I used to think as I looked out on the Hollywood night, there must be thousands of girls sitting alone like me, dreaming of becoming a movie star," she wrote. "But I'm not going to worry about them. I'm dreaming the hardest." So in 1947, with ambition in spades, but with stardom far from a foregone conclusion, what was Marilyn's next move? The studio's decision to drop Marilyn didn't stop her. Now with her sights set firmly on a life in the limelight, she continued to work. She took up modelling again to make ends meet, and even when she was dropped by another studio, Columbia, in 1948, she used modelling to survive. She was living hand to mouth, and it was at this time that she posed consensually for nude photographs. 4 years later, in 1953, they would appear on the cover of the very first issue of Playboy magazine, this time without her consent. By 1950, after more than 4 years of carving out her way in the tough industry, Marilyn had re-signed with 20th Century Fox. And through sheer persistence, she began securing quality roles. By 1953, she was everywhere. With hits including Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire, all released in that same year, Marilyn Monroe was one of the studio's most commercially successful performers, and she had become a cultural phenomenon. But as Professor Lucy Bolton explained to me on the History Extra podcast, Marilyn was also stretching her acting muscles at this time. She'd played a worker in a canning factory in Clash by Night, and a murderous babysitter in Don't Bother to Knock. These were really quite dark roles, but they're often overlooked in Marilyn's story because, as Lucy put it, neither of these films fit with the image of Marilyn that developed in 1953. And in 1953, it was her breezy delivery and knowingly naive charm that became known. She might have made it look easy, but Marilyn knew that images were constructed and maintained, and she'd worked hard to craft hers. For the thriller Niagara, she and her makeup artist Whitey Snyder engineered her iconic lip look by using 5 different shades of red lipstick and liner. In that same film, she debuted her famous Monroe wiggle. In one 30-second shot, the camera stayed trained on her jaunty, hip-swinging walk. Despite the spectacular backdrop of Niagara Falls, it is Monroe's deliberate movement that dominates the screen. When pressed about her walking style and whether it was contrived for attention, Marilyn reportedly replied, "I learned to walk when I was 10 months old, and I've been walking this way ever since." And yet, at the same time as Marilyn was becoming this popular, sexy bombshell, she was also being paid less than many of her co-stars and treated by the studios as a replaceable starlet. How could she make sure she reached the next level of success? Well, she had a few more cards to play. In January 1954, when she was offered a role in a musical comedy film, The Girl in Pink Tights, she discovered she was going to be paid a great deal less than her co-star, Frank Sinatra. She also railed against her typecasting as a ditzy schoolteacher and dismissed the script as trash. Marilyn knew this wasn't the direction she wanted for her career. So what did she do? She walked away. Her resulting clash with the studio head, Darryl F. Zanuck, is regarded as a watershed moment when an actor stood up for equal pay, directly combating the contractual control that the studio exercised over her during the early years of her career. Marilyn left Hollywood for New York and broke her contract with 20th Century Fox. In the same month as she walked away from the studio, she also married baseball star Joe DiMaggio, who pressured her to retire and become a housewife. That didn't fit with what Marilyn wanted, and eventually she renegotiated a contract with Fox, which gave her script and director approval and a substantially higher salary. In 1954, Marilyn returned to Hollywood as the lead in Billy Wilder's The 7-Year Itch. In one scene, she stood on a subway grate, only to have her white dress billow up, revealing her legs. It's a scene that has been reproduced and parodied countless times since, and has become one of the most iconic pop culture moments of the 20th century. But this scene in particular proved to be a defining moment in Monroe and DiMaggio's marriage. Causing his jealousy to peak, he reportedly stormed off set. Refusing to compromise her career, Marilyn filed for divorce just 274 days after they married. And next, she made one of the boldest career moves of the era. In late 1954, Marilyn founded her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions. This was a radical act of defiance. The major studios had given her a platform to construct her bombshell image, and now Marilyn was reclaiming ownership of it. By this stage, Marilyn wanted serious, dramatic roles, and through her own production company, she gained the power to choose her own scripts, select her directors, and control how she was seen. Ever ambitious, Professor Lucy Bolton told me that Marilyn was also mixing with the likes of director Elia Kazan, screenwriter Truman Capote, and actor Marlon Brando at this time. She was focusing her energy into perfecting her acting craft, and she also studied at the prestigious Actors Studio under famed American acting coach Lee Strasberg. Marilyn was reinventing herself, and her marriage to Arthur Miller in June 1956 only seemed to confirm this. The sex symbol was marrying America's most celebrated playwright. The press famed their union as beauty meets brains, but the reality was different. As we've already seen from her uncompromising moves and savvy negotiation, Marilyn had always had the brains, the hard-working attitude and the ambition, and she'd used those attributes to construct her beautiful, iconic image. She had achieved her dreams, as she wrote herself, by dreaming the hardest. What came next wasn't to match the starry ambitions of her earlier years, but it's not what you think. The final years of Marilyn's life were difficult. Following her marriage to Miller in 1956, Marilyn increasingly suffered severe anxiety, depression, and insomnia. And the excessive medication she took for these conditions, mixed with a concoction of drugs and champagne, led to periods of hospitalization. Her personal life also began to fracture. During the filming of the 1957 film The Prince and the Showgirl, Marilyn discovered Miller's private notebook, where he had written that he was embarrassed by her and that he thought she was stupid. And the worst part was, Marilyn believed he'd left it out for her to find. The marriage ultimately ended in 1961 after the production of Western romance The Misfits, a film that they worked on together. Though she had further burnished her career with a star performance in Billy Wilder's 1959 Some Like It Hot, behind the scenes, her erratic behaviour caused by illness and addiction was causing colleagues and co-stars alike to disparage Marilyn. After she and Miller separated and a stint in a psychiatric hospital, Marilyn began working on her next film, Something's Got to Give, in 1962. But when her ill health meant that she was repeatedly absent from the set, and she also absconded from the schedule to fly to New York to sing Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy against the studio's wishes, she was fired from the film. And it is here that Marilyn's story often ends. She was at rock bottom, alone and broken by the system. But it wasn't over just yet. In July 1962, Marilyn's fierce career ambition resurfaced. She was rehired by Fox, began negotiating future film projects, and she even had launched a massive PR campaign with interviews and photo shoots for Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and Life magazines. Marilyn was rebuilding herself and actively working. But before filming could resume, Marilyn was found dead on the 5th of August 1962. She was just 36. Her death was ruled a probable suicide. As Professor Lucy Bolton explained, when Marilyn died, it was far from the case that she was at her lowest ebb. She'd survived much worse, and in fact, she certainly had things on the cards to look forward to and to work for. A century after her birth, Marilyn Monroe remains one of the most recognisable women in history. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about her isn't her status as a cultural icon, but that she constructed her image herself, working relentlessly and effectively across her hard-fought career. From a childhood of instability and poverty, Norma Jeane worked meticulously to construct the Marilyn Monroe we know today. Behind the blonde bombshell facade was a self-made woman who understood exactly what she wanted and precisely how hard she had to work to get it. For more about Marilyn Monroe, you can listen to the podcast I recorded with Lucy Bolton, And you can also read the feature which Lucy wrote for History Extra magazine, and you can find all of that on the History Extra app.